Yeah, it is actually true. When we talk to people, um, sort of without openness and connecting to people, it feels like we do talk to a mirror.
Hmm.
I think,
Or to a construction in our heads more.
yeah.
I think there's part of the problem with asynchronous communication, like Twitter or Instagram, where you put a post, somebody else puts a post, you read it later. So there's no connection in time with the other person. And there's
Mm,
no expectation of we're going to really have a conversation about this. It's just like, I'm going to screech something and then you make a point. And so there's this gotcha, there's sort of the natural progression. And that's what a lot of those platforms, I mean, it's not all of it, but a lot of it ends up being like that.
yeah.
Doesn't have to be.
Also talking about projections, you know.
Oh, that's going to come up today.
Like we are projecting things we sort of um, sort of relieved, like we lived, and then other people kind of just either affirm or deny our already existing beliefs as well.
Have you noticed one of the things that I like to notice are verbal pauses that are going around because there's social contagion. So somebody will start doing, especially with social media these days. So someone starts doing it, and then I don't know, it appeals to someone else, and then they start repeating it, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is the what I call the right virus, right? Where
Yeah.
you say like no 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 no, right, and then blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah, right, and it is so common. Like professional broadcasters are doing it, YouTubers doing it. Everybody is doing. Oh my God, it's been going on for like 5 or 6 years now. So I've spotted a new one that's brand new. I've noticed recently, and that is to go and then say whatever point. So you do like a and then an exhale, which shows like I've got pent up internal frustration, and now I'm gonna talk about it. And so you do this little act. You go, it's so difficult. And that little thing, I don't know how to spell it yet, that is going around. That is now infecting people all over the place. So look for it.
Oh wow.
Enjoy. I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing. It's just something we do.
Is it like
It sounds like
dismissing?
I was going to say that's when it sounds like they're bringing back what Al Gore did. They cost him the election, or they in one of the debates he did that every time
Oh,
Bush
he
was
did the
making
heavy
a point.
sigh.
Yeah, he did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I
it
bet
came
these
off
things
real
come in
heavy on the Mac.
cycles.
Yeah,
Mm.
like fashion. Bell bottoms. They come in, they go out, they come back. Tag.
Yeah. And it's a little play. It's like a little vignette whenever anybody does it in my head. They'll just throw it in the middle. Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question. And I'm like, that is so false. From the moment you went, it was false. Like you were just pretending that. At least that's the way it feels to me. Maybe it's entirely authentic from their side.
That the appendage of right kind of triggers my autism some of the time because it's like they're projecting. Again, we can get into that later, but projecting my need to either agree or disagree with them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's an ask. They're like right, but there's no wait for response. So it's a pseudo conversation where they're not really asking. They're just like, agree with me, agree. And anywhere, any one of those, you might go, no, but they've gone on like 7 levels. And so in the
Well,
end, they say, like, do you agree with me? And you're like, there were bits that were fine, right?
it's funny because I think I've also heard the I don't know what you call it, the addendum, right question mark, used as like a clarifying of like, it's like, so if someone's giving a presentation, they're actually like looking for feedback from the audience. So like that's actually like an invitation to be like, hey, like, are you guys on the same page, or do I need to like spell something out here? And then it's like no one
That's
says
legitimate.
anything. Yeah, so no one says anything. Like no one has a look of confusion. It's not even like a verbal thing. It's like they'll just look for the audience, be like, "Are you guys confused?" And it's like, "Oh, that guy looks like he's confused," and they'll be like, "Okay," and then they'll try to like be like, "Well, but maybe I should rephrase this."
I mean, it could be the beginning of an actual inquiry,
Yeah,
and then you know, but it's the way it's been used now. It's very fast. It's just thrown into a stream, and it's this unanswered ask to agreement. And I'm with Graham. I'm like, "Duh," every time they do it, which is probably why I started noticing it so much.
Yes.
Right has become the new you know.
Yeah, that's true.
I
It's even
actually
more
hear it a
explicit.
lot. It's like people selling to you something. Feels like a car salesman. So, yeah.
Oh, now that I'll finish up with, and you mentioned that, like when you do the little rights, like if it's little teeny steps of agreement, then you get to do the boil the frog thing, and eventually you end up buying the car from the car salesman.
Yeah. Okay, and we are live, 5 minutes in. So, welcome in the final of Nonviolent Communication. And today we are talking about expressing appreciation in NVC. Well, I'm welcoming in the panel Algernon, Kevin Flowers, and Graham Pong. You guys can't see Graham Pong, but he's always with us in his voice and spirit. Okay, let me get the first introductory slide. There we go. Yes, expressing appreciation in nonviolent communication. What matters is actually the intention behind the appreciation, because compliments very often seen as judgment, and it's like either positive or negative, they still are seen as judgment of ourselves or others, let's say. And yeah, very often as well, that Marshall B. Rosenberg states in the book, appreciation and gratitude is used in order to manipulate a person to continue doing the good thing. And I actually myself kind of traumatized by gratitude. It's like if people come up to me and like, I'm so grateful for the things you do to me and for me. And I'm like, okay, you want something from me. What do you want next? I already tense up, kind of.
Right.
So that feeling. And I would like to know your opinion on manipulation via gratitude. Let's say, Algernon, what do you think about that?
I guess I'll start with I agree with the idea that the intention behind it matters and that it can be a judgment. I mean, it is a judgment. But like, do you want to live in a world with no compliments and no criticism? Because it might be, you know, something mildly unpleasant or whatever. There's a lot of, I don't know, to appreciate something doesn't always fall into the structure of the things that he gave as steps. So I could see how those three things could be useful. I appreciate the idea that going into more detail about how it is to appreciate something, even if it doesn't quite follow the structure there, gives you an opportunity to think about, you know, do I really mean this, etc. And then to express it in a way that, you know, is more authentic and true to what you really mean, as opposed to like a thrown off just, oh, that was so good. You're like, all right, it's vague, and those are the vague short things, even though they might be heartfelt, are the ones that are likely to come off as superficial. I don't know. What is it? I'll tag out.
Well, in that case, Graham, what do you think about manipulation?
I was going to say, for me, Rosenberg isn't so much talking about appreciation as he is gift giving. Because, you know, just expressing appreciation or it isn't in and of itself the problem for me. It's when that's tagged with an expectation of something to follow. And an expression of appreciation shouldn't have any expectation attached to it. Just a, just bringing up to date sort of a, yeah, thanks for the gift kind of thing, and expressing the appreciation. And then you both move on with a clean slate. And I think what Rosenberg is identifying are those people who they see it as a tit for tat sort of thing. Now that I've given this to you, you now owe me something in exchange. And I can definitely say I've encountered plenty of people who have that approach to gift giving sort of thing. Gonna tag.
Thank you.
I was going to say that gift giving puts a little bit different spin on there to me. We can talk more about that, but like the idea that, so let's say, an actual physical gift was exchanged, the odds that that then creates stuff whether you intended it or not. You're like, well, I won't give this gift next time if I disagree with you. So it'd be good if you disagree with me if you want more gifts. That kind of dynamic, even if it wasn't intended, can show up in the case of, sort of rewards, a reward benefit thing. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead, Kevin.
No.
It's funny because I think that's actually something I hadn't thought about in terms of because I think Rosenberg outlines there's usually two ways, I guess, expressing gratitude can go wrong, or at least like receiving gratitude. Yeah, it's like, because I could do the thing where I say, "Oh, no big deal," and that's me like doing this false humility thing, which he's like not a fan of. And then there's this other version of like, "Oh yeah, I am worthy of this gratitude." I'm like, which is a sense of superiority, which he is also not a fan of. But I didn't think about the fact that like there's also these situations, which Graham just made me think of with the gift giving metaphor analogy, and it's situations I found myself in where like the person gives me a compliment and I'm like, "Oh crap, am I supposed to reciprocate?" And I just feel like,
Yeah.
"Oh no, I can't just make something up. Like it should be a genuine compliment."
Depth to it, right?
And part of that is, I think, in the way that Graham was maybe alluding to, is like part of that is like maybe an impulse like, "Oh no, they just did this for me. I need to somehow reciprocate, so that way it's like an even playing field. So that way, like, it doesn't kind of maintain this status differential." But yeah, I think it's interesting about the manipulative component that, and also I guess we'll get into it, but the like I very often, very very for very long periods of my life had difficulty with the like notion of compliment, because and particularly if they came from like a random person like off the street, right, who was like, "Hey, I like your shirt." And I remember like thinking to myself, well, if some random person on the street walked up to me and said, "Your shirt sucks,"
Yeah.
I would just dismiss it, right? Like, so why shouldn't I be equally dismissive of someone who's just randomly,
It
throwing
feels
out
good.
um
Recognized.
well, but it's actually, it's like with these three components, appreciation actually made me realize, because someone actually questioned me about this several years ago, about like, what if someone like gave you specific details about what it was and like why they're doing that? And I was like, oh, that'd be way different, but like people don't normally do that, and then reading this was like, oh, this is exactly what I was hoping. Like, if you just, which again, I think these three components take a level of self-awareness that is not necessarily easy, and it also takes vulnerability, because like you can't just say like what you appreciated, right? You have to say like how it made you feel, right? So you have to have that level of vulnerability, and you also have, like, which goes back to self-awareness, you have to have the awareness of like, well, why did I feel like X, Y, and Z about this? Like, it's like, why did I feel hopeful and relieved? It's like, oh, okay, I guess it must be because like the example you gave of like the woman who's like, you said, this thing and this thing in your presentation or the workshop, and that gave me something I could use to connect with my 18-year-old son. And it's like, so she had to do that, and he even mentions like it took her a while, like in the conversation, to like get to that point. Like she had to like actually just pause for a little bit and like reflect. So it doesn't seem like this is something you can do just kind of like off the cuff. It has to be a somewhat deliberate process. I also don't know how you'd, because I thought about doing this to a friend of mine who gave me a compliment recently. I was like, how do I like prompt them into this mode without like it being weird and being like feeling kind of oddly demanding of like, Well, no, you're that gratitude's not good enough. I need you to go, these extra layers deep. So I don't know. Tag out.
I want to ask about the like what Graham touched upon. Thank you, Kevin. What Graham touched upon was interesting. The transactional gratitude. So if somebody says, here is what I'm grateful for, yada yada yada, but then do you feel like in our transactional world where everything for something we always like give and take sort of thing, rather than like we are not used to just acts of joy, kindness, like pure appreciation, and like without expecting anything in return? We aren't used to it. Like that thing is rare. And I actually, when somebody does come to me with a lot of gratitude, I kind of feel there is something I have to give back in return, like this kind of transaction going on. Yeah.
I think in cases where you don't have a depth of relationship with the other person, I find those compliments harder to absorb. And if their compliment is hyperbolic, which they might do just out of kind of courtesy or whatever, you are amazing. You're like, okay, like, how are you going to, you're like, I am amazing. No. Or you're not going to go, no, I'm not amazing. And then you're forced, because they've been hyperbolic, you're sort of forced into, I don't even know what to do with that. And this, is calling for the details and stuff, and your motivations helps keep you out of that hyperbolic space.
Well, I'm hyper excitable. So I very often say people, oh my God, you were so great. I loved it. Like,
What
so
was it
I
that you
go
liked?
into that.
That's
sorry?
like my first, like I said, what was it that you liked? Like,
Yeah, and then I would like follow up with a
abstract,
shit
then
ton
it's
of
easy to
details.
just go, oh, they're just blowing smoke. We're just playing the trading compliments game, which can be a pleasantry, but it doesn't have depth. It doesn't have authenticity, and it's not going to be felt like, oh, thank you. Like, I really feel like no one was ever noticing, and I'm happy to see that at least sometimes people notice.
Okay. So the next part is the 3 components of appreciation. Well, and here nonviolent communication does propose a way which is again connected to observation, feelings, needs, and requests, and then applying to nonviolent communication. So we are, let's say, describing what is it that you did that contributed to our well-being, like observation basically, then particular needs of ours that had been met. I kind of think it's connected to the first one in a way. And then the last one, the feelings that we have
Pleasureful
after we received the thing that we are grateful for or express appreciation for. Like, to me personally, I find it difficult because I am socially awkward, and building a full sentence is a problem for me. So I would go like for, you're awesome, that's it. And I would put into you're awesome everything, like all I mean, because building a full sentence is difficult for me. And apparently that's wrong. And that's not how it should be made. Like, this seems like a lot of work. What do you think, guys?
So I wouldn't say it's wrong, because he actually goes out of his way in that chapter even to say, like, because he's like, it could just be a simple thank you or a smile. Is like, as long as like these things are kind of communicated through that action, because sometimes like that is enough, right? Someone just gives you like, pat on the back or a hug or whatever, or high five, and that's like enough. Like you get like kind of where they're coming from. But I think he's just trying to promote this kind of like cautious, like covering your bases, just to make sure that like it's not just taken as this kind of superfluous, like, oh, they don't really know what they're like saying, like they're just saying you're awesome. It's like, no, they really do like mean this, or like, yeah, that really was like, coming from this place. But anyway, tag out.
again, I think these are like useful suggestions. I don't know if they apply in all cases, and they are like, to apply them seems to require a level of self-awareness that I don't think a lot of people possess, especially in casual conversation. So, for example, to recognize, to express what your particular needs that have been fulfilled, the likelihood that you've got some narrative in your head about some need that you have that has now been fulfilled by whatever it is you're complimenting somebody about is high, and maybe delusional. And, you know, it's fine. It doesn't always have to be perfect, but then you're kind of asking the other person to go along with whatever the delusion was. Like, you could play a musical piece on a piano and not be a good pianist, and play it and know that there were like a lot of errors and problems. And someone else is like, oh my God, that was the best I've ever heard that played. And you're like, all right, but actually it sucked. Anyway, my point is, to be able to judge what your needs are is particularly fraught, with projections and stuff like that. It's a good intention and it's good to strive for, but I think a lot of people are going to miss understanding their own motivations properly or clearly. So, tag.
Graham, are you driving?
Yeah. Yeah.
I hope I'm not endangering you.
Yeah, if you hit
No,
traffic,
no, not
let
at
us
all.
know.
You should have just been like, I'm defusing a bomb right now, guys. I can't talk.
Clip the red wire. It's always the red wire.
No, it's always the green one. Or
No.
the one, like the turquoise. To choose the turquoise one.
Mm. So it's the one you don't think it is, and you switch at the last minute, whatever.
Oh yeah, that's the one with the dots. Pick the one with the dots, like the regular one, the zebra one.
Zebra one. All right.
Yes. I was like, it's
So,
like in
Graham, what
bomb
do you-
making.
We have gone down a little rabbit hole there. Man, this video just got demonetized, didn't it, on keywords?
Yeah. So guys,
ahead,
like
Graham.
whoever does the
What do you think
bombs, just
about
like
this
use the one will be rainbow wire, the other one will like zebra wire, and then a leopard. Always use the leopard wire. And then you just like have this, instead of colors, just like use the leopard wire, of course. And then there should be one matrix one, like with the green.
We may have gone off topic.
Sorry. Okay, Graham, what do you think about using nonviolent communication? So, like, let's say gratitude expressed in a very structured manner.
I'm sort of with Algernon, where I see where Rosenberg's going for, but I think he's missing his mark. One of the goals I think he's going for is the idea of not being manipulative yourself. And he's trying to establish some checks on have the individual put some checks on themselves to make sure they're not making those manipulative gratitude gestures, and they're not having the tit for tat sort of expectation there. Tag.
So what is, because you said he in some way he's missing the mark. What do you mean? Or how could he have hit, like, what was the mark, and also how could he have hit it?
A lot of it has to go with the idea of non-communication has to happen within a bubble where both parties agree to it. And so it's almost like this is the great rule if you're within that bubble, but it's not going to work well if you're trying to interact with people outside of it. That's, again, even Rosenberg himself admits there are issues when he tries to apply nonviolent communication with people that don't subscribe to it. That's where I'm saying he misses the mark as a universal sort of principle. It's a nice procedure. It's a great tool to have. Does that make more sense to you?
Yeah, I think so. And actually, I just thought, like, because I think you're right. Like, it's like I could, if I'm on the giving end of the or the appreciation, then I could actually just do this regardless of the other person, right? But I can't, like, if it's flipped where I'm, on the receiving end of a compliment, it's like, and that's what actually what I was voicing earlier. It's like I don't know how to get the person to do that. Like, because if they don't even have access to the structure or even don't want to do it, they're just like, no, I don't have time for that, and they just like go about their day. Then it's like
But
I'm
I guess
SOL, right?
you can model it for them, even though in that conversation didn't necessarily work out. Like if they see you, I think it's good. It's good to look at how do you give advice, what's appropriate, what's what are your motivations, and what do you hope to gain from it, and is it a good thing to not advice to appreciation, to express appreciation to other people. How do you do that cautiously or appropriately and not by manipulation or even unwittingly trying to manipulate the other person? And then how do you receive a compliment that somebody else pitches at you in a way that's useful? And grandma's gotten to the store.
Success. I think also I just realized that and I didn't really know about this framework, but I think I'd received a compliment once, and I remember asking, oh, I actually it was more like I think they said like I'm proud of you, and I was like, oh, like what are you proud about? And it was funny because I don't think it was like a mindlessly uttered statement. It was like kind of in reaction to whatever the course of the conversation was going, and but and also I have issues with this area as well. I think they had the kind of working memory deficits, and so like as soon as I asked them like, oh, like, well, what are you proud about, like what when you said that,
No.
they're like, they immediately were just like, oh no, I forgot. Like they're like, I don't know, like, but they knew it was like like it was in response to something that they had just gotten, but then it was just like, oh wait, I don't remember, like, and it was just, and so that wasn't like them opting out or like or even like a lack of self-awareness per se. It was just like they just couldn't remember in the course of the conversation what had brought that up. So
And in that moment of being asked, man, do we fabricate? We fabricate like a LLM. We're like, what are the symbols that fit in this space to explain what I just said, as opposed to, oh, I carefully reasoned it and then I uttered a sentence, which is something that never happens during conversation. Hardly ever.
Yeah. I still think it's different people as well. Like people are so different, and there is ways of expressing that are difficult. Like for me, it's difficult to talk to sometimes. Like I force myself to talk. I make myself like I need to kind of like all those rules of building a sentence and translating it into another language, and it's all of it is difficult. So yeah, I do believe it's a practice though.
Do you have an expression for faint praise in one of your native languages?
Faint praise?
Faint praise. So in English, we have this thing called faint praise, where you'll praise somebody, but it's like a superficial thing. Like you're just giving praise because you're supposed to give praise. And then so you'll say like, oh, good job. There'll be like some kid who's not that capable and they'll do something, and oftentimes it's kind of condescending, but with little kids is almost more appropriate. Yeah, where they'll like do something like, oh, good, you really celebrate it to give them this positive feedback. And if you do that all the time, regardless of what it was that they did, if they did it or didn't do it, and you're just like, oh, good job, then that's faint praise. It's like it's hollow. It doesn't.
well,
It's
so
not backed by reality.
Can I give an example to see if I get what you're talking about?
Okay.
Like where I was at a friend's house, and they have a small child, and the child like wanted to make hot chocolate with like boba tea bubbles in it, or like tapioca like balls.
Mhm.
And and they went through the process and made it right, and then like offered people at the party, or like the little small gathering, and it wasn't that great. It was not it was not enjoyable for
Right.
me to consume. But like, am I going to tell the child, oh, that's terrible? Like, why would you give me this?
No.
Right. Like, I'm gonna say, oh, thanks. Like, like, because I did appreciate like they went through this process, and like they're also trying to navigate social or like kind of decorum. Even like their mother had like specifically instructed them, hey, like don't interrupt them, like wait for a pause and then offer them, like trying to get them acclimated to social decorum. But I think, is that like an example you're talking about, sort of,
That
or
would be an example. I think usually when people call, because you're doing that out of social nicety for the kid, and I agree with doing that to some extent. But like when you do that, like say you did that in a work environment, and every time you wrote a memo, your boss shot you a blind copy response that said, "Oh my God, excellent email." Like everyone you sent out, you would eventually come to be like, that means nothing to me. Like, what do you, oh, I get this stupid, it was great, and you're like, there's no thought behind it. There's no, you're not doing into details of what you liked or whatever. You're not doing any of this stuff. You're giving faint praise. It's very hollow. A tangible example with kids that I'll throw in, it's not too long, was I used to help out sometimes with a therapeutic writing program with some actually disabled kids with various things. And people pretty easily slip into the mode of just you always congratulate them. And so we ask them to do various exercises like lift arms up over their head or whatever during the session. And when they do, I found that I didn't like just always congratulating them. Like if they didn't do the exercise, I would say like, "Oh, we can do better next time," something like that, as opposed to "good job, good job." And most people would go right to the good job, whether they did a good job or not. And that started to that felt false to me to say that to them. I don't know if they really received it that way, but I'm like,
So
I can't
is
be
it-
authentic with them if I just always saying good job when it's not a good job.
but is that like, is there just distinction between? And actually, I don't know. Like, so I'm kind of asking you, like, so like using praise, because like, okay, so let's say like the example I gave, right, or maybe like there's like the kid's gonna have to give a talk, whatever, right, in front of a classroom, and it's like they could have not done the talk. Maybe they did it poorly, right? But like, so there's like praise as like a form of encouragement, of like trying to encourage them continue, right, so that way they can get more practice and get better at the thing, versus praise as I guess what you're calling faint praise, right? Where it's kind of like just empty, hollow, and there's no actual
Yeah.
like content to it. There's no information, like just like the boss who gives
That's a
you
good way to put it.
the thing over and over, where it's like, because I know what you mean. It's like if it's just like good email or thanks, that was a great email. It's like, well, what was good about it? Like this goes back to the components thing. It's
Right.
like I don't know what was
Especially
good
if they
about it.
send it all the time.
Yeah.
And then you're like, now it's just a false signal that you send every time. So it's faint praise. Like you're giving this praise and then the person receiving it is like, whatever. Like it doesn't have any value anymore. So I like your conception of like it has to have content. It's a nice short way to put it.
I really like with the gratitude, the false gratitude that I actually adore. So there is this TV show called Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, and
Boy.
it's co-written with a comedian called Rachel Bloom, and she's amazing. I love that woman. She's great, and so she's having a song where she's forcing people to admit that she's a good person. And then she comes, puts the knife to Guy's throat and says, "Say I'm a good person. Say it. I will gut you. Say right now I'm a good person." And he said, "You're a good person." And she's, "Oh, thank you." And she continues. And I start laughing because and then she's like, "Oh my God, such a good, real good person." And it's one of her greatest hits. And like the way she says, "Oh, thank you." And that's what I don't know if it's faint gratitude, but it's definitely
that's
in the
faint,
part.
but it's pointing at the same phenomenon, I think. Like they're mocking it with the humor, but it's that same thing where you like people, if they start to expect that appreciation, that's another space. I don't know if you get into that, but where supposing you live with another person, let's say a roommate from college, you live with a roommate from the college and they always compliment you on something silly. And then they come to expect that you will, of course, remunerate them with trivial comments and appreciations. So there's like an expectation every time they come in the room. You say like, "Oh, what do I really appreciate that you've done?" And having that burden be there, like that's not authentic either.
Yeah. So I would like to read a part of the book right now that I like. So he talks about the workshop Marshall B. Rosenberg, in his chapter 13, about a man from a Palestinian background expressing appreciation. So the man says, this training will be very valuable for us in working for peace in our country. And then he acknowledged, I would like to thank you in a way that the Sufi Muslims do when we want to express special appreciation for something. And now, look how beautiful and poetic it is. That's my judgment onto it. Locking his thumb onto mine, looking straight into my eyes, he says, I kiss the God in you that allows you to give us what you did. And he kissed his hand. So that idea of expressing appreciation, but like with such a beautiful kind of like almost, I don't know, theatrical way, and yet sincere. That one deserves special mention. I think it's sincere.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing, but why does it look sincere? Why do you say that's sincere? I agree that it's sincere.
It's a feeling.
I'm thinking it's because like the tradition that's held by that Sufi, like that's part of their deep tradition. That's part of their, like they hold that almost sacred. They don't do that for just anything. It's not common, I would imagine. You're not doing that for, you remembered to pick up some milk. They hold that at a high level. So if they do that, it's like it has weight behind it. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. It's not the memo, right? It's not the boss constantly doing, which actually made me think that's ECC. Like, because this is the thing, right? Because I'm sure we all know people like this who are like, if it's a person who always gives you a compliment, then you're like, you kind of start like being like, this doesn't really mean anything. But this person who like never gives compliments, and you know that, like, because you see them consistently just not doing that, and they give you one, and you're like, oh man, okay, this must actually be a legitimate compliment.
Yeah,
I just realized there's one that's oops, sorry, time delay.
No, it's okay. Say.
I don't know if we want to go into it, but like when I was working, we were using a product called MS Teams, Microsoft Teams. If you have any sway over your organization, don't do it. Anyway, it encourages stuff like sending out trivial pre-canned compliments to your coworkers and your teammates. Like it's got a lot of structure aimed right along those lines for like every little thing that somebody does. You give them a thumbs up, or you send them a little GIF, or you award merit badges amongst each other and all that. And I just thought, oh my gosh, this is such a superficial, horrible way for humans to work with one another. So that's how I feel with Microsoft Teams, and that lines up with this because I feel a lot of that is like structural like I gave you a thumbs up. How many thumbs ups did you give me last month? It sets all that up naturally, and it's just not a good use of, it's not a good humaning.
Transactional, right?
Yeah, it's very transactional.
I wanted to ask Graham about ways, like Graham, which ways of appreciation you have a different perspective on the world. Like you're very logical, let's say, in your perceptions. What type of gratitude do you accept and feel is valid and non-manipulative?
Oh, that's, I was going to say, that's a nice way of putting my view of the world, Kara. Kind of different. It's more of, I accept gratitude at face value, which runs me into problems with the transactional people, because I don't always recognize that they're expecting a transaction back. and then that causes friction when they expect it, and I'm like, what are you talking about? One thing I wanted to comment on here is just the mouthing the words. That's actually kind of a corporate strategy and things, because people will respond to just hearing the compliment. Part of it's the idea of self-esteem. And if you tell them positive things, they're going to think positively about themselves and become better. And it's also the building the community and the using the belonging versus exclusion aspect to control people, where once they get used to saying that, it's like all of a sudden if they don't hear it, it's like, what did I do wrong? And it's actually a corporate strategy that they use with employees, which is, again, why Microsoft Teams incorporates it so much. Going to tag on that.
So then, just to clarify, so you're basically saying like you'd be like cool with any type of, I guess, compliment or expression of appreciation that's given to you, more or less.
Unless they make it overtly obvious it's a transactional sort of thing. As long as it's sort of a thank you or just general sorts of things, I'm good with that. I try to give the same things. I try to give the same things back. I give random compliments to people. And again, the basis is it needs to be genuine. It needs to be fact-based. Every time I've given it to somebody at random, I've always had a reason behind it if they asked why. And in fact, I've usually included that in my compliments.
There's something here about giving a compliment in a public space or a private space, where if you're giving compliments in front of other people, then that, you may not mean it this way, but that is an arena in which manipulation can be used. Like, other people want to get the compliment. See, I'm complimenting Tony. Don't you want to be like Tony? And then Tony's all like, oh, well, thank you. And I'm better than all these other people. Look, I get the compliment. So, but if you're like, contact Tony directly and you're like, dude, you nailed that sales meeting. Like, you nailed it. I was watching the customer and they were just falling over themselves on what you presented. Not in front of anybody else. This is directly to Tony. You're just saying it to Tony. Hopefully you're not doing it to manipulate him or her. That's authentic. But if you're just like, hey, everybody, let's have a round of applause for, that's, let's give a thumbs up on our MS Teams message. And if you don't, well, I guess it means you hate Tony. That kind of thing.
Yeah. I was thinking about appreciation that is blown out of proportion as well. Let's say somebody does something absolutely mundane, like opening a door in the car, just so you step in. Like there's those kind of just polite chivalry, just polite things, and then you're like, wow, that's so amazing, nobody ever does this for me, I love you, I will be your servant till the rest of the time. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
It's like
over appreciation.
Over appreciation, is there such thing?
I bet, especially when people are trying to, make a little play for one another, a little vignette, that kind of thing does happen. I think it's pretty rare. It's rare in my circles, but I don't know for other people.
What do you mean, Algernon, like in a romantic context where you're like, hey, I actually want to be maybe romantically involved with this person, so I'm going to like drum this up? Is that what you're pointing at? Or
no, I was pointing at what was I pointing at exactly? Oh, here I go trying to fabricate. It wasn't in a romantic context. It could be applied in other contexts, more general.
But like, I guess I don't understand. You say vignette, right?
Like you're putting on a little act, and so like you're adding drama. So someone says some compliment, and you're like, oh my God, thank you for noticing. And then, I don't know, you gush for half an hour over someone opening that door for you, to use Kara's example. So sometimes I think the short ones, and I see these all over the place, sometimes just like a short acknowledgement and connection of eye gaze can communicate all kinds of stuff. So like you can be somewhere and two people are trying to get in a door at one point, and you see the other person's got like two kids in tow, and you just sort of like make way, and you like there's maybe a little chaos cloud that's running along them with the kids, and you kind of just sort of give a nod to the parents like, oh, I get it. And they're like, ah, and they go on in this. No, there's my sigh. They go on and it's different when I do it. They go into the store. Anyway, you just like with a little nod where you're like, yeah, I acknowledge what you're putting up with there. So you don't have to say much, but it's usually pretty authentic when you do that. And that's like appreciation of their situation. I don't know if that's quite appreciation, but something. But is pointing to eye contact in that the one with the thumbs, I think that's critical. And unfortunately, we can't do it online yet till they turn LCDs into cameras. But that's its own nightmare. But we can't meet each other's gaze in the same way that we can in person. It's one of the deficits of this thing. If I stare there, I can't see your eyes. And I think
you can see my eyes later.
Yeah, I can look over there, but now I'm not looking at you. And so we can never at the same time, but it's possible to put the camera lenses into the screen and then mathematically combine it back so they can put the camera directly into the screen. Hopefully they won't start doing that or haven't started doing that. Go ahead.
So receiving appreciation. And there is such a thing as false humility or feeling of superiority. When we receive appreciation, of course, you should be grateful. I was awesome. Like that's that one. Or the other one is like, no, I don't deserve it. And or
that way.
and like the best way to receive appreciation per nonviolent communication, or basically a rule in general, is just joyfully. Just know that you did something good that helps somebody else. That's in itself is awesome. And I actually think there is a way of delivery that is not, fake.
I think his suggestion that you stick to specifics, and understand the motivations and stuff, that helps keep you out of this hyperbolic space. It's a lot easier to respond to a non-hyperbolic compliment or appreciation. If someone says, you said blah, 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 and that really resonated with me because blah, blah, blah. That's good, right? You can just sort of appreciate that there was that meeting of the minds. But like, you were the most everything you say, Kara, is just like lyrics to my ears. Everything. You're amazing.
I should believe that.
You're like, go on. But if it's too hyperbolic, then if you accept it, then you're being super egotistical. And if you just demur, then that's almost like accepting it with false humility. It's not a good place to be. It's hard to navigate those.
The one you really need to avoid is that really the best you can do? Tag.
Oh, man. Oof. Well, I think I'm better than that. Yikes. I guess you could do it with false humility. And I've seen people like self-deprecate.
Awesome. Yeah, what do you think, Ivan? Anyway, guys, just free for all.
Yeah, I think it's so yeah, a couple ideas came to mind, and I'm just gonna throw them out there to see how these land. So it occurred to me, and it's like kind of like the theme I think Graham has been pointing to, that there's using compliments as like this quid pro quo, like like I'm doing this because I want something in return. Like either you're gonna like reciprocate with a compliment, or like I'm kind of buttering you up because I'm gonna ask you for like a really big ask in a second, like something that I really want from you. And I know this is like the best way to get that kind of thing. So that's I think the distinction between like the transactional, instrumental nature of compliments versus like the actual legitimate expression of gratitude and appreciation. But then I was wondering, like, how does this relate to the distinction that Algernon brought up of like the context of being a public or a private space, right? And how that kind of shifts our evaluation of it. Which kind of also relates to that motivation thing I was saying earlier, where it's like, if a manager, right, in a like sends out like a group email saying, hey, like Bob, good job on this whatever presentation, it's like the manager might trying to be encouraging of Bob. He might also trying to be not just encouraging, but like to encourage other people to kind of engage in that kind of behavior, right? So there's that component I don't know what to do with, and there's another thing because of the hyperbole that was brought up that like this is a thing that will happen. I learned just recently in text with these things called tone indicators, which are selectively used throughout various parts of the internet. But the common ones are like it's like a /S, and it's supposed to say sarcastic, right? Or /J, which means joking. And the example, there's actually a person who was on the spectrum, autism spectrum, gave an analysis of like, okay, yeah, I found a lot of these helpful, but here's one is like universally just unhelpful. People stop using this. It was the half joking one, and I'll just put that on the table for now. But what's interesting is he gave like these comments of like people would write in all caps like OMG, this is like the most amazing video in the world, right? But people would also do this other thing where they'd be hyperbolic in the opposite direction, like OMG, delete this, like this should not exist. And then they put /joking. So that really means this hyperbolic statement in the negative direction is like them actually saying, oh my God, like like, oh, it's the worst thing in the world. They really mean that's really good stuff. And I like this. And so there's like this weird thing that I don't know how to make sense of in terms of hyperbole and like the kind of ironic or sarcastic use of it, or joking use, because I think those are different. So I don't know what to make with any of these, but I just threw them out there to see where y'all want to go with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, my take on that is the public versus private is and you're doing it in private, you're building your interpersonal relationship. Public, now you're dealing with the group dynamics, and that's usually the inclusion exclusion on one axis and the dominant submission on the other axis. And like when you're calling out one person for special recognition, there you're establishing your hierarchy thing. The compliments are to part of the belonging part of the group, and you start removing them, you start feeling the exclusion aspect. And to me, that's I think what Algernon was pointing to in some of or at least my take on it for the in private or in public sort of thing. Feel free to correct me, Algernon. I'm gonna tag.
Yeah, that was directly in line with what I was saying. There's a great example of it in the movie. What is it? Ender's Game, where the general manipulates the situation when our hero first gets on the transport shuttle, and he basically gives him a compliment, like a big compliment, and tells everyone else on the launch that they're idiots and that he got it right. Anyway, and then he points out to Graf as the character's name. He's like, you just poisoned me against everyone on this thing now hates me. And the guy's like, yeah, well, no, like this forces you to develop a personal relationship with every single person to counter that and become a leader. See ya. Anyway, it's a great example there. And that was done manipulatively, of course, but it just sort of is a nice cinematic example, simplified example.
Yeah. I think I remember that. So welcome, Karl. We are in the slide 2, discussing receiving appreciation.
Mm.
And so there are
Oh, no.
two ways of receiving appreciation. One would be with a sense of inadequacy, either superiority or false humility, and the other one, which presumably is the right way to receive gratitude, is receiving it joyfully with awareness that you helped someone,
Mm.
actually.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you, what's your take on it?
Thanks. Yeah, that was one of the most powerful things, among the very powerful things I get from Marshall Rosenberg's work, is that there's an idea that I need to translate both an insult and a compliment, and that they both have the same danger of separating me from, and warping the connection between me and the other person and with myself. And to separate, the observation from about, like, to translate what they're saying into, they're saying like, you are a great person, you're a good person, and if I engage at the level of meaning, then, and I want to stay right sized about it and accurate about it, I'm like, I'm not a great person, I'm a person, I'm I'm not great, God is great, there's a whole bunch of things, and I'm even further separating myself from this person. Like, there's something, and it seems like in every sentence that, there's some truth and there's some falsehood. I can engage at the level of tone or literal meaning. That's all my decision. So what people say to me, I still have some choices in the matter about what they say to me, what they are saying to me, and how I'm going to respond. And with appreciation, yeah, I agree with you. You said the gratitude. That's what I there's nothing better than getting in touch with gratitude that I can see. And their gratitude is my gratitude. If I can feel them having gratitude, then that changes my neurochemistry and my happiness. And I'm very grateful for you organizing this and for you allowing me to join even late. And I apologize for the disruption to the group. I'll get it together better next time.
No, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Next time, I think we are going to discuss John Vervaeke's work,
Sweet.
which would be
Not the whole thing.
not the whole thing,
Not the whole
just
thing?
some part of it. So I remember we talked. I'm sorry. Sorry, Graham. So not the whole thing, but just parts of it. Let's say translating his works to regular folks, like basically, let's
Translating, yeah.
say, kind of, yeah. Like, what is a domicide? What is reciprocal narrowing? Ecology of practices, all of that. We can just like do a fun.
If we don't go too far into translation and interpretation, and can just sort of like say, this is what he said, and this is what it means to me. Like, it's not from somebody from 10,000 years ago. So it'd be a little easier to interpret him. Even though the stuff he's based is, he would be the first to tell you that the ideas aren't his originally.
Yeah.
It seems like you're onto something that I might really value, but I don't think I understand it quite. You saying, Matthew, to not focus on translating, but to do what's the other? Yeah, thanks.
Well, like we've made a list of some of them, like optimal grip. So he has this expression, optimal grip, and then he'll go on for quite some time to tell you exactly what he means, or at least, you'll have a good understanding of what he is meaning by these words at the end of his presentation. So you don't have to guess at that part. So it's not that we're, saying, oh, it's all very complicated sciencey words and we shall interpret for you.
I love it. Yeah. And it sounds like you'd prefer us to talk about how that translates into, what that looks like in our life and how we apply it.
I bet that's going to be the way to go.
Yeah,
because
I like
it's going to keep people grounded as opposed to just big fluffy concepts. Like that would be good, that would be bad. It'd be more like, what does this mean to you? Is it useful?
I love that distinction. Thank you. Yeah, I'll take that to heart and second that.
I was going to say, one of the challenges for me sounds like he's using a lot of terms in a very specialized jargon manner. And it's a matter of trying to learn what his actual definitions are. So because I have to do that before I can even decide whether I agree or not.
Right.
Okay.
And I think that's what the conversation can be useful for, to say, like, here's, I don't want to say reinterpretation of the word, but you have to use a lot of these words overlap and say, this is what I mean, and I'm getting it from the ancient whatever. And then we have this shorthand that we can use if you're familiar with what he said, that you could use to communicate the idea behind it. And so we aim to talk about the ideas behind it.
I want to hear for myself. I just want to say that I'd love to hear stories. Like that's what sticks in my head and it makes pictures that I can really translate into action in my own life. And it's such a different way of processing. That guy JC, yeah, I love stories. So that's what I want to hear. Yeah, he was good at them stories.
He didn't write them down then.
No, anyway. He didn't. Neither did Socrates.
Socrates.
All these people not. Nobody.
Did they have writing capabilities at the time?
Yes, they did. But I mean, Socrates in what is it, Phaedrus? He talks about, he warns against language itself and especially writing. He's like, if I'm talking to you and you say something, that's one step removed from my understanding of the truth, like a Plato's cave sense, I guess. And then writing, that's somebody in a completely different.
People could read it 2,000 years from now, and how they heck can understand what you meant.
I wonder what Kevin is up to. We can hear Graham's cat.
Some of this was my noise. I knocked over a water bottle, so I apologize for that. Oh,
fell on the cat.
And that's Kevin.
I appreciate the well, one, I think there's probably some, I imagine he wouldn't have thought about it, but I imagine there's some self-awareness in Plato writing that statement, right? Writing it down about like, man, you can't freaking trust words like that, especially if they're written down. Like what, it's just like, he knows, like, he was into poetry and obviously philosophy, but there also, I guess I wanted to note this because this is a thing whenever Karl came in. So one, this is a good time for you to practice this. So I appreciate your presence here because I feel like, so when it feels me, I guess I feel like comforted and also like delighted because it's nice to have, I think, someone in the conversation, and maybe other people have already had exposure to this, but it feels like, from what I know about you, Karl, like you've actually like had time to like digest this kind of approach or these kind of frames and these like kind of general rules of thumb and how they actually like, how do you utilize them, right? And like, especially whenever you brought up the notion of like, he does this thing, which I didn't even think about to connect, like where it's like, he's trying to translate insults or compliments, really any language in a way that doesn't like disconnect you from yourself and others, right? And this kind of like, which Rosenberg calls a life alienating way. But I think that points to what you're saying about the, how did you phrase it? It was like the notion of, oh, it's not me. Like, I'm not like, the great thing. It's like, it's something like kind of higher than myself that like, maybe I'm able to embody in this moment, but it's not like, you shouldn't reduce that to me and I shouldn't identify myself, right, with the greatness or the compliment, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
So I want to voice that appreciation. And then now I'm trying to think on the fly of like, well, what particular needs are met? I guess maybe there's a need for like, maybe there's like a need for exposure to a perspective that like practices the thing. Because this very much seems to me and maybe some of y'all have gotten a chance to go through some of them, but it seems to me like a lot of this book is just like, this is what you buy after you go to the workshop. Like this is just to remind you of the things that, you know, went on in the workshop, of like the role play and the kind of, you know, perspective taking that they try to actually like actively do, model, and then like, you know, keep getting better at that process. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. And one of the things, thank you so much. And I see the appreciation on your face, and I felt it. And as you were talking about it and getting into as you were analyzing things, just looking for needs, I just felt like this kind of like the picture, the Mendelbrot set that Graham's got for his thing. I just felt this thing rise up, and you know, I felt my heart touch the skin of my body. You know, I mean, it probably sounds more dramatic than it was, but it was just something was relieved. And I wanted to ask if you and you know, following things in that, you know, that little formula is so, I find, very powerful, either explicitly or internally. But the end part, even with the compliment, is to give a request. And that's so difficult. Do you have a request for me, Kevin? And sometimes the request is, please tell me how you feel when you hear me say that.
Oh, you know, actually, maybe I don't understand the component of the requests. Because I guess like I don't really have a request other than like, thanks for being here. Maybe do that again. That'd be cool.
Yeah. I really took it, and I felt it and stuff. And I just wanted to continue in the vein that you were going in, but that formula, like it's such an intimate thing at the end. It puts, you know, it's like really hanging my ass out in the wind and going like, I've got a request and you can take it or leave it. Do my words mean anything to you? It's a real investment. And even just the simple words, like I already did it. I already said how I felt when you heard me say that, or when I heard you say that. But that at the end. So is there any other request so it sounded like it was you had a need to express appreciation, a need for connection, and it was around the need for, you said perspective and also order. And I'm asking it like my sponsor coached me for years, is when you say that, have a question mark at the end of he's like, you're doing everything by the book, you're doing all the words, but you need to have a question mark at the end. And so yeah, is there anything?
It's funny. I think actually you just made me realize that there's maybe a distinction that might be helpful about the I mean, and could definitely be wrong with this, but it sounds like the way that Rosenberg is framing this gratitude process, it's very similar to the other process, which I forgot like what the context was. I think the context was like, maybe you're in dispute, maybe like there's something that's kind of triggering you emotionally, right? And you're trying to like, in real time, when X happens, right, I feel Y because of need Z, you know, kind of, therefore I request whatever.
Yes.
And it's funny because it just made me realize, it's like, oh, it's kind of like the gratitude is kind of like that, but you just flop off the request part. It's just like, no, I just want to like kind of, because and that's interesting, right? Because I guess it's like one is from the state of like, there's some need not being met, and the other one's from like, the need has been met, and I'm trying to actually like communicate that to you. So thank you for that, because that's something I didn't think about.
Yeah, thank you. That's such a great distinction. I love that distinction. And okay.
sorry.
I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to talk a little bit about our need for appreciation, actually. So also Marshall B. Rosenberg mentions that thing where people crave for real appreciation, but not just like those superficial ones, but the things we actually do, we put our heart into it and nobody notices it, nobody. And then we crave for people to notice the things we actually do for them, or like we try to do, like we spend most of our times And then if we make a mistake, everybody notices. Like it's I mean, maybe it's not true, but we feel like everybody notices. All of that contrasts to the idea that the good things we do aren't noticed, and yet each mistake is blown out of proportion. So and there is a question connected to that, and it's a personal one. You guys don't need to answer, or maybe just talk about something else related to that subject. And here is a thing: what appreciation somebody would tell you that would make you actually jump from joy, that would make you rejoice in it. And I personally, like mine, I would not even dare to say it out loud. That's how personal it is. It's how unnoticed I feel and how personal it is. And yeah, Graham.
Oh, I'm just going to go off on my own page again. And part of my approach is not to really need appreciation, but want it. And that way I remove.
What was the last part of that? But want it?
Yeah, I want it. There's a difference between a need and a want.
Okay. Sorry.
Because if I put it into the want category, now I'm basically, creating that imbalance. I'm putting myself at the mercy of the other person's whims.
Mm-hmm.
And, I try to have as few needs as I can, and that way, satisfy those, and then I can move on to the wants that I want to take care of. And it's not that I don't appreciate appreciation. It's if I don't get it, well, I'm going to be okay with it. Doing the task, try to do tasks that the tasks themselves are satisfying enough for me. Hagen.
Yeah, I too was going to comment about, what would leave you jumping for joy? And my question is, why are you requiring external validation via appreciation to be able to enjoy whatever it is you just offered? So, be that work or whatever it was that they're appreciating. You're like, I feel like it should come from the thing itself authentically, and then someone else, might acknowledge, join in your own recognition of it. Like that feels more authentic than if you're like, oh man, this stuff I'm doing, this doesn't even matter unless people are all gushing all over it. That seems like you've got it misconstrued in your head. Like you've set yourself up with an external control to be like, whether or not I enjoy this depends on what other people think. And that feels somewhat disconnected from where you want to be.
I'd like to maybe propose counter perspective to that, maybe, because I think if I understand it right, and I'm actually having a hard time thinking of an example like this for me personally, but like I think it's coming from the place of, because what the example he gives in the book is like there's a lady who like makes a schedule right every month, and it's just like, and it's so much friggin', and if you ever made schedules, man, mathematically they're an intractable problem. Like this is like a thing that is fairly straightforward to demonstrate, but it like it's very hard to do that even like remotely well, and the thing that she was describing, right, in her experience, is that she like she tries so freaking hard every month to like get the schedule like where everyone's kind of like has their preferences met, maybe needs, maybe wants, and every time, like every month, there'd be at least a couple people who'd be like, hey man, this, I'm pissed off about this, like I don't like the fact that I'll schedule this instead of that. And so I think it's from this like kind of context of you're doing a task that's actually like very cumbersome, very like laborious, very tiresome, very draining for you, and like, but you still give it like you still really invest in your energy and time into it. And yeah, I need more time to think about like what, because I think that's the framing. I think the framing is not like, oh, like I'm looking for external validation. I think the framing is like, this is a fucking like chore, and I am doing this right for hopefully the well-being of other people. And if that happens, long enough, I think people can get burnt out from that process, right? Like I think it happens to teachers, people in really any service industries, medical professionals, right? Doctors, nurses, where it's like, if it's always like, kind of like, oh my God, I'm going through this like, 10, 12-hour shifts. And like, if there's never any of that, like, like, hey man, like actually these little things that you pay attention to, I really appreciate that. Then it can like really just like take someone out. But I have to think more about, like, I will just tag out because I need to, like, it's hard to imagine that experience because I think that's kind of where it's coming from. But
Karl?
Thank you. Yeah. When I heard Graham mention the distinction between needing and wanting the appreciation, I felt excitement because that met my need for order. It reminded me of that, my need for order being met. And for me, like, it doesn't matter what the word is for me. It seems like, that I use for the need. It's that I'm looking for what we have in common as needs or human instincts. What connects us? What do we have? What separates? What distinguishes for me between the strategies going on and the needs that those strategies are going towards? And this is not to conflict with what Graham is saying or with what Matthew is saying, but for me, it fits nicely. Appreciation fits nicely as a need. I don't need your appreciation per se. I do need appreciation. Like I need it expressed. I don't need it expressed as any particular word, thank you or something. Somebody could call me an a-hole, but if I understand it's coming from appreciation, they're like, oh, you made that point, you made that point against me in the sporting event and you're an a-hole. And it's like appreciation for what I did and appreciation for me showing up and making them play better next time, but that for me, making that distinction gives so much order. And I wanted to pull the part of the conversation into this part of the conversation, what Kevin, about the need for we've been talking about a need for an ask at the end of expressing appreciation. And that's so that the other person knows otherwise it can be, I can say, thank you so much, Kara, for setting this up. And then I'm like, that's it. And Kara, you are free to think whatever you want. You can go like, Karl's saying that because he wants me to invite him next time. Karl's saying that because he wants to make me like him. And if I put a request at the end, if I fill everything out, I'm like, Kara, I feel so much gratitude for being in this conversation right now. This is a dream come true to be able to talk about these things in real time with people I respect. It meets my need for meaning so much to be able to share my experiences and in the hope that it can help other people touch the people around them. And I can be part of this bigger flowering of humanity connecting. And I want to know if you understand how wonderful this is for me right now.
There's not an ask, in the chapter, he doesn't have an ask at the end of his appreciation steps.
He does not.
You've added that.
I've added that.
Make it work. Yeah.
Like
in the NBC process, that ask is definitely there. But in this part, he's just got a slide.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't here for that part. But it didn't have an explicit ask. But I do think like it encouraged having a dialogue where you drill into the details of it back and forth, and so that the person understands what it was you appreciated in detail. That is kind of the ask. Like you want to understand, you want to have a meeting of the mind. Sorry,
I want to push back on that. There's 100% Marshall Rosenberg, and I may be incorrect in associating with this particular
I'm only talking
book.
about the chapter.
Yeah,
like chapter 13 of this book.
He never says to make an ask at the end of an expression of gratitude,
appreciation, right?
Of appreciation.
Yeah, it's just got 3 parts of kind of acknowledging the action that contribute to your well-being, feeling needs that were met by that action, and then the pleasurable feelings that were brought up, engendered by the fulfillment of those needs.
And there's no ask. Okay,
Nope.
I wonder where I got that. Okay, well, I stepped down off of that, but nonetheless, I really appreciate being here, and I'm gonna get that book and stick my nose in it and see if I can see where I got that idea.
Oh, it's definitely
He's
in there.
got a lot of stuff, so that maybe
Don't worry. It's actually all of his NVC. It does consist of 4 parts, which is again observation, feelings, need, request. So it is true.
So it fits in the larger shell anyway. So
Absolutely,
so it's kind of the
100%.
Kevin's point where in his conception in chapter 13 is kind of left off his own 4th step.
Yes. So here I just like pulled it up. That's the summary of the chapter 13. This is what you did. This is what I feel. This is what need of mine was met. And in order to avoid the transactional part of it, he doesn't put the ask. But I do believe when it's a question, because like request and the question, there are two. It's like they're not like I'm linguistically different from that, but like to me, request and the question, they are connected, and yet there is this distinction. And I like the question as well because it's like I would like a further interaction. It's like the implication of it. I would like to know more, and I would like to I would basically like to have the dialogue.
It sounds. I just wanted to make sure I understood that. It sounds like in chapter 13, he's saying there's 4 parts, but the last part is just a request for you to reflect back how you felt when I heard that, when you heard me say this thing. It's not exactly like in the chapter 13, he drops that part completely out. Okay. That last kind of 4th part was my kind of like I would say it's a stretch that I also got. Okay. Well, Marshall B. Rosenberg, you are inconsistent. You actually had those 4 things. Like, how about like you just put out? But I actually like it's good to think that you brought it up, Karl, because I wanted to point at this distinction because that's why I prepared this slide as well. So there are those 3 parts, and he did drop the request away. And the way he understands it is because gratitude and appreciation in itself should not be transactional. And the transactional part of it should be avoided somehow. Yeah. I should have had my book already. I'm just going to grab it off the shelf. Sorry. Yes, absolutely.
We're almost done.
Yeah, we're almost done. That's true. Yeah. So there is one more part, one more question, and those words in a pink I just kept as a summary of the entire chapter, but the blue part here, there. I actually noticed, I hope for people it's not blurred, that like
your back, that font.
Yeah,
that font is readable. Yeah.
It's slightly fuzzy, but it's doable.
Thank you. So overcoming a reluctance to express appreciation, and that's for me also a big deal. Like I actually have the same problem. I am very reluctant to say appreciation, not because I don't feel gratitude, but because I'm scared people might take it as manipulation, because that's the way I very often see anything. Like I'm mistrusting everything, and because this is my problem, I'm kind of projecting it onto other people. So words may be poor vehicles in conveying our heartfelt realities, but as I have learned, anything that is worth doing poorly. So appreciation, I get it. Like I also had problems with that, Algernon. So like not anything, but like in case of appreciation,
we need
just do it.
/s.
Yeah. I quoted the book. So I would like to know Graham's point on that. Overcoming reluctance to say thank you.
I was going to say, for me, I don't have a whole lot of reluctance there because I don't put a lot of stock in that other person thinking I'm going to be manipulative. If they do, they do. You know, they'll find out soon enough that I'm not manipulative, regardless of what they think. So I'm really good at saying thank you. I'm really good at showing appreciation. And part of that's because I'd rather be the person who does say thank you. I think that makes the world a better place. And if they don't find it a better place, oh well, sucks to be them. Tagging out.
Kevin?
Yeah, it's interesting because I actually find myself kind of in a somewhere between Car's disposition to be like, oh, I'm like hesitant because like what to take the wrong way, right? And it's like they'll take it as manipulation, and then Graham's perspective like, it's like it's no problem. Like it for me it usually depends on the context of the person, because like if I know that person, let's say gets easily embarrassed if you try to like like bring up stuff like this, like then I'm like, oh man, like how am I going to do this in a way that like kind of like they're comfortable with like kind of being in that space of like, because it just occurred to me there's like an interesting kind of vulnerability that's necessary, not just to give the thanks but to receive the thanks genuinely. Because I know people who are like and sometimes I do this as well, where like if someone gives you some like sincere compliment, or expressing some kind of gratitude, I'll just like kind of like downplay it. I'll just be like, it's no big deal, like don't worry about it, like which I think at least before this discussion, and maybe this book, I would conceive that as me trying to like, level the playing field. I'm like, no, I'm not way up here. I'm like where you're at. But yeah, I think it's tricky because I don't and it also goes back to that previous thing that I said about where someone random off the street walked up to me and said your shirt sucks. I would just dismiss what they're saying. In the same way, if someone random off the street came up to me and said, you have an awesome shirt, but that like I think I would
that too.
I mean, kind of. I mean, it's just because at least like emotionally, like maybe verbally, I do the social niceties, but like it's just and sometimes I try to reframe it to where it's like, okay, I think where that person is coming from because they're trying to like just express appreciation in some sense, and like, and it's a weird move that I think successfully make all the time, or maybe even most of the time, where like it's trying to appreciate that like, okay, so do I actually care what they think about my shirt? No. But I do care that they were willing to, put themselves in this interaction they didn't have to otherwise do, in order to express, right, the thing that they happen to be liking about, like, I have a hard time with those compliments. And again, it depends on like context. The stranger, is it someone I know, like what kind of like how do they relate to the thing that I'm trying to express appreciation for. And I mixed this up because like this would be like me giving someone, so if it was me giving someone random on the street, because this is actually something that's fairly straightforward for me to do. It's like I remember like specifically some example where like I saw someone walking and they had cool shoelaces, like that was it. I looked at their shoes. I think they even saw me looking at their shoes, and I was like, I like your shoelaces, and that was it. Like just like walked away.
It's a good thing or bad thing.
Yeah, it's funny because it's yeah, it's so weird. Yeah, I don't think, I think I'm just mixed on this. I think I have contradictory approaches depending on the situation. So tag out.
I think I'm very clear on this one. You compliment the shoelaces. I once put a little blue shaka hair right there. I was getting gray spot, and I was like, and my hairstylist said, we can put color there. And I was like, do it. So anyway, so I had like blue and then purple for a little while. It was just like one little spot. Anyway, I raised that because that's one of those times where I had strangers coming up to me out in wherever and just go like, I like your hair. And you're like, how do you take that? And I'm going to fall solidly in the camp of when somebody gives you a compliment, you just straighten your spine and go, well, thank you. And you occasionally, when you see something else where someone else has put a little extra effort in or something, or has some nice shoelaces or something clever, you recognize it. You don't have to make a giant thing of it, but you go like, I like your shirt. I like your shoelaces. I think that to Graham's earlier point, that makes the world a little bit nicer, warmer place where we do recognize these little things that people do. So I don't have much trouble with that aspect. Even though they could take it wrong. They could say, oh, you were coming on to me. And you're like, nah, you just had neat shoelaces. As to what he said, man, I hate that he co-opted that expression. Anything that's worth doing is worth doing poorly. Like, I guess his point was saying better to have attempted to communicate your appreciation and done poorly at that than not to have tried to express your appreciation at all, which is really kind of windy. But I think that's what he meant. But then to co-opt the expression of anything that's worth doing is worth doing poorly, because that really is not a good thought to have in your head. And try to apply it to exact other things. Like, something that is worth doing is worth attempting to do well. You know, you might not always have time anyway. So I take exception to the way he did that. If he had the sarcasm /s, he might have used it.
Was that in the book? I actually don't remember that phrase.
It
Yeah,
was in
it
the
was.
book. I balked
It
when I read it the
was.
first time.
Oh, I see. I just must have glossed over it.
I actually remembered where Karl had the communicating the desire to be understood. It is actually part where if you are communicating with another person, just remember it's important to get a feedback because it's part of actually communicating. People sometimes drift away, people don't hear you, and it is actually an interesting point that you brought up. I did not think about it, but do we need to hear a feedback? Actually, Marshall Beaver, when you are communicating something, please get a feedback. So here is request and the question: how did you take it? What did my thing made you feel? Like, it is actually a part. It's a big part. It's a massive chunk of nonviolent communication to get feedback on the conversation. How is it with appreciation, though?
I was going to say, maybe that last step is one last, that person appreciating your appreciation.
It's the end, right? Like, it's the end point.
You want it to taper off, but you want it, and there's like that one last nod that both people go and say, all right, you communicated appreciation. I in detail appreciated that you did that. The other person's like,
and then you shake hands and then you go away.
Yeah, it's like a common acknowledgement that both have an understanding of the situation.
Karl, what did you think about that?
Oh, I loved all of that. And Matthew, thank you again for helping me clarify, get more clear on things. I see he doesn't do that in the slide there and in the book. And I got some confusion around on 187. He just makes a request after doing that in his example. And it does seem more like, Carol, what you're saying is follow through or getting feedback. When I was in the military, target practice, especially early on, I would have a great feeling. I am hitting that target. I feel so good. I've got serotonin in my blood. I'm raising my status in this unit, and I am doing great. And until I take that humbling walk down to the target and go, oh no, look at that. I can tell from, the holes are all up and down. You were breathing a whole bunch and you weren't holding your breath. Oh, it's pulling, I forget, to the left or the right and up or down. I forget which, but you're jerking the trigger. You're not squeezing it. And so, for that reason, just for follow through and to go like, am I just making mouth noises or do I know what the target is? I got to confirm. Maybe I have not expressed I've tried to express appreciation, but maybe I haven't. I don't know. And to get over, to your question, to get over my resistance to expressing appreciation I love the resistance that I have, and there's a resistance to expressing appreciation. I'm like, oh man, now I have to do it. Like I know what happens when I start to back away from that. I'm not going to be it's the same circuits, a lot of the same circuits that I use for expressing, like when I got to get I need to make a request here to get my needs met. And if I don't say something, I'm going to poison this relationship, and it's way better to go towards expressing communication or appreciation, to practice all those same skills, and it takes as much courage to do it, but I think it can take as much courage, and just the payoff, like I walk away, I'm just going to live the rest of my life wondering if I'm the kind of person that shows people how they touched them, or at least tried. And when I, go to bed at night, I'm like, man, I lived today. I accepted, I showed up for my part in humanity more than if I had just gone like, oh, this is going to be uncomfortable, which I don't always do it, but I love that resistance, because the level of resistance kind of indicates, the size of the dragon kind of indicates the size of the pot of gold that the dragon is protecting.
I like that conception.
Me too.
I wanted to go back to one of the things, one of the other problems I had, but it's an appreciation of the book, that the words may be poor vehicles in conveying our helpful. And basically he was sort of dissing the idea of using my appreciation is so ineffable, I couldn't, really do it justice, so therefore I won't do it. And he's saying, just do it. I think it's really kind of a cop-out, because when I think about that in terms of myself, like in real situations, I will know why I appreciated something. If it's authentic and I look at it, like I appreciate what it could be, you just had a good belly laugh and you needed it. But you're going to know. So this withdrawing into, oh, it's so ineffable, I couldn't possibly, or it's so deep, I can't touch it. That just strikes me as very shallow dismissals.
I don't remember this part. I'm not clear of what
it's off of the slide behind Kara.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Well, welcome.
Overcoming your reluctance.
Welcome, Cordelh. So
Hello,
we are talking now generally about gratitude, just a free conversation, no more turns, just a discussion for the next 30 minutes. So you're in a good place.
Hey, Cordelh.
And so right now the contagious thing that is actually raising question, and I agree with Algernon, anything that is worth doing poorly. And I actually think, well, not anything. There are some things that you should not do at all, unless you do it well. Let's say somebody talked about, I think it's even you, driving a boat. If you cannot drive a boat, don't.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like the stuff
if you don't drive a boat poorly, you'll never drive a boat well.
Well, if you have somebody to teach you, I mean, if like,
there
give me something
ways.
There, because if it's just like
you'll still do it poorly.
I mean,
driving a boat's pretty easy.
If you don't know how to swim, don't jump in the sea.
If you don't know how to speak publicly,
it seems like it's
keep
not.
Your mouth shut. These are bad advices in general.
It seems like, I apologize. It seems like anything that is worth doing poorly is worth doing poorly. It does not preclude trying to do it well. And I do everything imperfectly.
But if it's left open like that, then it's almost saying like, do it poorly, do it well, doesn't matter. And I don't believe that.
But isn't it more like evolving? Like, for example, you start by swimming in the swimming pool and then you jump in the sea. You know,
Yeah.
like you start
thrashing.
smaller, like
Kiddie pool, a little
yeah,
bit
I
deeper.
mean, it's like driving the boat, you know, like you start with, you know, like something that you can manage, and little by little you go forward and forward.
So what do you think about the expression? Anything that is worth doing is worth doing poorly. Is this an instruction you would give to your children?
I have to say, I have a lot of difficulties with gratitude, because at the same time, I feel that everything that is worth doing, that is actually helpful and right and good, does not require gratefulness. Some things are just worth doing because you know they're the right thing to do, whatever the cost, and you try to do it. And I don't know. It seems to me that that's one aspect of gratitude, you know? Like if everything that's right and good and all of that doesn't deserve gratitude, then where does it leave gratitude? Where does it leave space for gratitude?
When you say it's right, though, like you're trying to put it right, I think that's you showing gratitude toward Gaia, everything, whatever your word is for that. Like you're saying, there's a right way, and I'm going to strive to make it do it the right way. Why would you strive to do it anyway? Like, why does it matter? And you're like, because.
Now, if somebody sees an injustice, if somebody sees an injustice, for example, somebody walks on the street and sees somebody being mistreated for whatever unjust reason there is, I wouldn't require that person to thank me if I helped that person out of that unjust situation. Or for example, what if I was walking in the park and I saw a kid drowning? I saved the kid. Should I expect the parents to be, grateful and give me $1,000 for saving the kids? I mean,
throw them back in.
It feels like I shouldn't, And I'm not saying that it's not required and it's not helpful.
In the purest form of it, absolutely. And I think we actually expressed this earlier, both Graham and I, that like the need for appreciation, if you feel that, is not a healthy impulse. Like it might not be that bad, but if you're doing it because you have a need, that's not like the healthy structure of this.
Well, doing something right with expectation is definitely not something that I would, I feel like that's the wrong way to approach doing something right. But recognition, like for example, if you see somebody saving the life of a kid in the park and you recognize that person, it's not required. I mean, somebody could just take a picture and that's it. But it's always nicer to go to that person, give him, a towel, tell him, oh, you did a good job, or something like that,
I think when it's not required is when it's most felt.
Yeah, that's where I was going, because the truth is, most of the things I would expect recognition for are actually things that are not required. And by that, I mean, I actually have a perfect example for that. When I was a kid, my dad used to tell me, how was it? If you're good with people all the time and then you do one bad thing, everybody's gonna hate you. But if you're an asshole all the time and you do one good thing, everybody's gonna forgive everything wrong you've done, and they're gonna thank you way more than it actually was worth it. And I used to hate that concept. I have to admit, growing up, I did notice that it may be a thing, that it is easier to punish the one person that never does anything wrong, and it is easier to congratulate the person that always does something wrong. And I think it's actually an aspect of our society that may exist, actually. Because nowadays we do,
what you're saying in there. Yep.
Yeah, we do throw flowers at people that speak their mind, tell it the way it is, or shit like that, And usually,
dare you?
it's sort of edgy what they say. So it's, I'm not saying that they're to blame for what they say. I'm saying that they actively saying edgy stuff and we actively trying flowers at them, you know. So it's kind of weird.
You made me think of Greta.
Sorry?
You made me think of Greta.
Well, I think a shit ton of people do that
Greta
on the left, on the right,
but
everywhere.
like that, I think we've created like an icon, and then we can gush over the icon, and it's the gushing really. Like even what she does isn't even that important. It's the response, and when you said throwing flowers, that's what I thought of.
Oh yeah, it's because I use throwing flowers because in French we say that as a way of expressing the concept of, you know, people adulating somebody else, and then they throw flowers at them, they congratulate them, they give compliments when it's all, you know, empty. It's actually sort of
empty?
what you guys were talking about, the gratitude. That's, you know, meaningless gratitude.
So that's the expression of throwing flowers is that that is false or lightly done. Is that correct?
Well, let's say I was
your own
yeah, let's say I was somebody really crazy, and to keep me from being too crazy with you, you would tell me compliments and always keep me calm and all of that, and tell me beautiful things about how beautiful I am, how smart and all of that, just to keep me cool. That would be throwing flowers.
Gotcha.
You're great. You don't need to get mad. You're great.
It seems like there's such a huge difference between the words, you know, any of the words that are used, and any even communication. This and knowing the other person appreciates what was done for them, even if they do not associate with this face or my name. You know, like that, when I see, you know, if I'm I've worked in restaurants, and, you know, if a cook looks out and sees people just going like, oh, I appreciate this food, nourishment, beauty, love, then the cook is like, got it. And but to make sure that the cook knows it, you know, like maybe I'm like, I really want to, is there some way I can get this cook to understand what this meant to me, that they touched another human being, that they contributed to humanity, and that makes them, that's I can be the universe validating them.
Yeah.
You know, but there doesn't have to be any thank yous. There doesn't have to be any words. It's just knowledge that I touched another person, and me going like, oh my God,
the
I
universe,
could give this.
Yeah. It's the universe giving validation. It totally is that, actually, because
it's technically, yeah.
I don't think most people, okay, I think it's really hard to feel gratitude towards somebody else, actually. You know, because we don't like to be at flow, we don't like to be losers, we don't like to, basically, we don't like to be in a situation in which we have to feel gratitude. So usually, I would argue that most situations in which we would actually feel deep gratitude are situations in which we would actually also feel shame or regret or something weird like that. And I think... I'm not saying it's systematic. I'm saying that often we find ourselves into that situation. And I think that's the moment in which we have to, you know, open up to our own self and open up to the idea that gratitude is not actually us being weak or anything like that, but it is us, like you said, the universe recognizing the good deeds, the something, you know, recognizing, validating somebody else. And I think that's important, actually. That's, yeah.
So that real quick,
I think of that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just there's a I think that connects nicely to the example that Rosenberg gives in the book of the guy, the Sufi Muslim, right, who does the thumb locking, and like in the phrase he uses, right, it's like it's in the language of wow, what was it you had the quote earlier, Kara, like the God in me sees the God in you or something like that. I'm probably butchering that terribly. But it's something to that effect, where you have this kind of mediating term of like it's not about you being above, right, or me being below you in the act of gratitude. It's like about establishing, you know, like a reverence for that way of engaging the world, I think. I don't know.
That approach is a beautiful concept, which I do agree with. We can feel gratitude towards deeds, but it's a little bit weird to feel gratitude towards an individual. You know, in the sense, I feel gratitude just because he exists. That's much harder. I feel that's a little weird, you know, but feeling gratitude because somebody was helpful, because somebody did the right thing, because somebody, I don't know, somebody did something that changes the world, that makes a lot more sense to me.
It seems like
when I think of that situation, I think if I see somebody who has done something, let's say giving, like made some sacrifice and did the right thing, especially if it were a difficult thing, if I see them do that, then I feel like a need come up through me that's like somebody has to reach out to them and go, thanks, saw what you did there, good. And I don't know if it's so much like me to that person, it's more like the universe going like, yeah, that, more of that. And like there's a responsibility to validate it and say like, yes, this is where we want to go, this, I appreciate this. So like you say, it's not like I don't know the person who did the thing that well as a person. I just saw the act that they did and I was like, that act has to be acknowledged. That feeling, that need, that feels like the universe acting through me. Not to get woo about it.
Andrew Huberman does
I need that.
Andrew Huberman does a podcast on gratitude and like the technical aspects of it, and receiving sincere gratitude from somebody like changes my neurochemistry. Like I get more, I forget everything it does, but good, happy chemicals. Another thing is watching someone express sincere gratitude to another person has the same effect on me as me receive, according to him, has a similar effect as me receiving that gratitude. And it seems like gratitude is its own reward. Like I don't get anything I have until I'm grateful for it. And to be the universe, being grateful for being the universe, like what is more sublime than that, except for boredom?
Karl, can you clarify I'm not sure I understood it right. Like so if we have like Bob and Chris, and were you saying that like if I, as Kevin, observe Bob give gratitude to Chris, then I'm going to get something out of that? Is that what you're saying?
Really expressing sincere gratitude, and the other person receiving it.
Okay.
There's some kind of circuit that goes that helps us be social creatures. Yeah, that's what that's my memory of what he's saying.
I think we can observe something similar with kids, like infants, before they know how to speak, you know, and you take care of them, you make them feel less sad, you make them stop to cry, you feed them, you change them. And I don't know if you guys have that, but every time I do that with a kid, I do feel like he has some form of gratitude in the eyes, you know, in the giggling, because suddenly he feels from uncomfortable to comfortable, or the attention, or it's not like a specific gratitude, you know, it's not like he says thank you or something like that, but it's more like body language stuff. And I think somebody mentioned that a little bit earlier while I was in the park, that there was a body language way of projecting gratitude. And I have to say that I do think that if you take a few kids and then you help one of the kids and he starts laughing, it may be contagious, actually, that satisfaction, laughter. So gratitude may be actually a source of positive feeling, you know. I don't know if we could say that all the baby feel gratitude because you took care of one of them, but I think happiness is actually contagious, basically. Yeah.
So this makes me wonder, because I feel like I need to bring something that I feel like is missing from this topic of like, what about like people who are in the state of mind, and maybe this is just something that like isn't addressable in the nonviolent communication framework, but like, so like, because so like, what if there's like a kid or maybe an adult, right, who sees the act of gratitude and is like, oh man, how come, Chris got that, that whole, like, like, how come they got that? I didn't get something out of it, right? Like there's how do I describe this? It's like a sense of jealousy or maybe a sense of envy, right? From like the like I think this could go wrong where like it doesn't do the thing where it spreads in a kind of positive way, but and again, I don't really know.
You're talking about the reward type of stuff. Like if somebody's rewarded, then somebody else gets jealous because of the reward.
Kind of, yeah, but like where they perceive the gratitude as a kind of reward, right? So to take Karl's point of like, if gratitude's a gift in and of itself, right, to both give it and receive it, then the person who's like observing that could possibly be in this mindset of like, motherfucker, like, how come he got that? I want that, like, and that could, I don't know, maybe I'm not sure if that would motivate them to like want to do the thing that they did, or if it might just make them like be resentful and spiteful towards like the person who received it, or even the person who gave it, or both. Yeah.
Read a paper that I think you guys would like about that. There was this experiment done, I think it's in the 70s, 80s, and they took little chimps, and then they made them do stuff for reward. And at one point, for the same exercise, they gave one of the chimp, a really good fruit. I think it was
they made it uneven
berry or something like that. And the other one, they gave them a biscuit, a dry biscuit. So
jealousy.
Yeah, one of them got really, really angry, the one that kept receiving biscuit. And the one that kept receiving berry eventually refused the berries. And there was this argument about how come the chimps sort of unionized. I wouldn't say unionized, but got together and rejected the exercise because they felt there was it wasn't a game anymore for them, basically.
Yeah, it's kind of muddled.
I would say that builds off the concept of genuine gratitude versus that throwing flowers concept you were talking about, where you're not going to get jealous if you're seeing it's based off of genuine gratitude and you didn't do something deserving of that sort of gratitude. And that's sort of, I think, where the chimps, they communicated amongst themselves and kind of came to that conclusion, where they weren't doing anything different, but they were getting rewarded differently. So that was their way to resolve the jealousy, was neither of them would get the big reward.
Yeah.
And this touches on one other thing, that a throwback, and that's the expectation, like if you save somebody, them being grateful for it. I look at it from my personal standpoint, where I'm not going to expect them to be grateful for it. But then I take a step back and look from the societal standpoint and say, if that person isn't grateful for somebody saving them, they're kind of a lesser person when it comes to that sort of situation. They really should be better than that. And as a society, we should expect them to be grateful for that, even though the individual doing the saving doesn't expect it. Gonna tag.
Well, it is hard though, because some deeds feel like it should be the norm, and some others in this world feel like they should be the norm, but nobody applies them. So you need to be thankful because it happens. I mean, that's for me personally, at least. I don't know if you guys feel that way sometimes, but like sometimes I do something right and people come and say, "Oh, thank you." I'm like, "No, that's the right thing. You don't need to thank me." It happens to me.
I guessed and it worked out.
I put in the chat what I got from etymology online about appreciate. It just means like to express appreciation is different than appreciating.
Yeah.
And
receiving
so
it or giving it.
Yeah, it's different. It's like to express it.
We've been talking about it for 2 hours. On the monkey experiment.
I'm sorry. I'm speechless. I got my first ever donations on this channel. I'm like,
oh, congratulations!
Amazing!
Wow.
Oh my god!
Bravo!
I'm like,
best thing ever.
Oh my god!
I can see your appreciation.
I'm so flustered.
You're expressing appreciation right now really well. This is great.
Like
Good job.
like Upcycle Club, like I'm very grateful for people for showing up. Like that's first thing. Generally, I'm always like, oh my God, you showed up. Thank you. Like that's
You're all flustered.
yeah.
Okay, so you
I-
feel
I- I d-
flustered.
I don't
You-
use makeup, so it's like all on the face, like everything that every emotion. Upcycle Club, thank you so much. I make sure, by the way, all the donations they go to my sister. So my sister is in Poland right now with her children, and her husband is in Ukraine, and she haven't seen him for a very long time. He's not allowed to leave Ukraine because he is in a military age. So leaving the country would be desertion. So he's there. And so she's like with two children in a country, and she's for almost a year now. And if there is anything, I promised my sister that it's for her. And yeah, thank you. Thank you. So like I actually like I'm very happy to receive it. Thank you so much. Yeah. That's it. Like I don't know how...
I just want to
Thank
point
you,
out that
Mercury. Also, Mercury Black is a friend of mine, and please check out Sorting Myself Out. I hope we will stream again sometime. And we had Cordelh and I did an interview and podcast with Mercury where we interviewed him.
Yeah, I remember it. That was cool. Hello,
Yeah.
Mercury.
Hey, Mercury.
I have to get
and
going, but
thank
I
you,
will watch,
Upcycle Club.
I will watch
again.
the rest of this video later, so I'll catch up on the
Yeah.
conversation, however it ends.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you,
guys.
Algernon. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, we proudly did. Thank you. We proudly did 2 hours now. And
I want to note that it's funny. I'm not sure if you're intentionally doing it, but you didn't do it in the order, right? Because I don't think the order really matters. But you did do the things, right? You did do like the like what I feel like surprise, like and I guess like right, just grateful, and also like you point out what it was, right? It's the fact that someone gave a donation, and then I think you pointed to the need, which the need was like I have a sister, right, who has a husband dealing with some serious shit, so this helps him out. So thank you for that.
Mhm.
So I think that was just cool as like I think probably an organic example of how this can kind of manifest.
yeah. Shout out my sister too, and she's probably watching it.
There is also a concept in gratitude that I think is nice to think about. Like, gratitude is basically what we have when somebody does something for us, sort of, like in general. So my issue with that is that sometimes we do things for others that can require a great sacrifice and can be seen as almost nothing, depending on the status of the giver and the receiver. So for example, if somebody has a lot of opportunities, wealth, and all of that, and is the richer, they may receive a gift or a sacrifice from somebody that's poorer and not notice how much it cost them. The same way, in reverse, somebody that's extremely wealthy could give a certain sum of money that seems like nothing for them, and the receiver could perceive it like a huge amount of money, and thus would be grateful way beyond the expectation of the person that gives it. And I think that's something that's really important to keep in mind, you know, in the gratitude stuff, because I personally feel that there is a right way to feel gratitude, you know, not feeling too much, not feeling too little. That's my perception of it, you know.
So I'm curious because I think for me it's kind of clear. So if like from the perspective of the poor person making a huge sacrifice to the rich person, to me that kind of makes sense as to what the obvious like corrective approach would be for the rich person is to like recognize, holy crap, like I should kind of take that into account. What would be the other way around though? Like, so if you had a rich person who gave likes and it's just like whatever, it's like their weekend spending money, to a poor person, like how should the relation be between the giver, this person being the rich, and the receiver being the poor? Like, what should be the?
Oh, I'm not saying I have a solution in my mind. I'm just putting on the perspectives, you know, that depending on your perspective, gratitude will be different. And it may also be well received or wrongly received. Because the truth is, you know, if somebody is has too much gratitude, at least to me it happens sometimes, I can feel it a little bit annoying. You know, I can be like, no, this is done, you know, it wasn't too much, don't worry about it. And that person can still feel gratitude. So it's not like I have a solution. It's just something I've noticed, you know, in life, you know, that happens basically.
It sounds like there's a concern for the need for appreciation and the need for sincerity in conflict with each other.
Mm-hmm.
But also like a proportionality, right? Like it has to be like, which is at least a
proportionality.
Yeah, like it seemed like there was like some kind of like right proportioning to the context, which I think Cordelh's bringing up, and yeah, and sorry, like I didn't mean to put you on the spot, like to ask like for a solution and so forth or per se, but like I was actually just trying to like get help from anyone else that maybe has an idea on it, because like it's not clear to me what. Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to imagine.
I would argue that the right way to receive it, if I was in a situation like that, would be graciously, you know, with grace. I feel gratitude with grace, and I won't bend down, upside, backward, whatever, and I won't dismiss it. You know, it needs to be with grace. Now, what does that mean? I have no specific clear. I think it depends on each individual, you know, to define what means to be gracious in their gratitude.
That kind of speak.
I was going to say, my take on what Cordelh is saying is the difference between relative benefit and relative sacrifice versus absolute benefit, absolute sacrifice. Where if that rich person gives a relatively small amount to them, that's going to produce a relatively huge impact on the other person, because it's a large objective, you know, absolute, you know, amount of money. And you know, and that's why the person is getting their gratitude based off of their relative benefit. And part of what Cordelh is bringing into attention is a difference there. And I would say what the flip side is for the rich person would be spending time with the other person, because time is much more valuable to a rich person than the money is. And just a thought on that one. I'm going to tag out.
I love that distinction. And it seems like if a cook comes to work and cooks a great meal, and they've got a sprained ankle, and they're you know, a loved one just died, you know, to look out and see people enjoying the food would be great. And somebody who actually knows what they're going through would be more appreciation, you know, they would appreciate more. And so it seems like if somebody's appreciating, they're like, oh, you just gave me, you know, I just pulled them, you know, I just saved them in some way, or did something that wasn't much. You know, I really, to get true and sincere appreciation, that's actually for what actually happened, like that's important. And yeah, so I think these are, I love where this conversation's going.
There is another aspect of gratitude that I think ought to be brought up. I read a study recently in social psychology, and basically the treaty was talking about, so we may assume that the person that is the recipient of help is feeling gratitude the most, or is feeling an attachment, to the person that helped them, saved them, or gave them something. But the reality of social behavior is actually that the person that invests themselves into somebody else is the one that feels the most attached to that person.
Mm.
And we can actually perceive that in many different things, like I forgot the examples, but there are many examples of that, in which if I invest myself into somebody, if I help them getting better, if I help them consistently, I will feel pride in their success.
Yeah.
While if I help them consistently and they lose, I may actually feel like the loss was mine. And that's it's actually close to the relationship that a parent has with a kid. Like, for example, a parent is helping consistently their kids, and they feel that kind of connection, in which the gratitude is natural. You see the body language, but it's not stated. And you keep investing yourself, and the kids, when he's doing good, it's almost your own success. My kid is smarter than the other kids. My kid did that. My kids wanna. You see what I mean? And this type of behavior is not only for parents and kids. It's actually a normal behavior that most humans have. That when they help somebody, they sort of have that hope, expectation that that person will succeed within the parameter of the help they gave.
Benjamin Franklin hacked that. There's a story about how there was another statesman that didn't like Benjamin Franklin, and Benjamin Franklin knew that, so he went to that guy, asked him, "Can I borrow this set of really expensive books that you've got?" He didn't need them. He just took them, borrowed them for like a couple weeks, and then gave them back, and then they were friends. Yeah. And so maybe there's some nefarious things that could be done with that. But I like to like people, and I like to hack myself and just go like, I'm having trouble with this person, something in me that I can't get past, and like, I'm just gonna do something for them. And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, I like this person. Oh, better universe. And yeah, it's totally selfish.
It is. No, I don't think we can say it's selfish, because selfish would mean that, you're taking advantage of the situation.
Right.
It's not right. What you're doing,
You're right. So enlightened self-interest.
Yeah. I'm not even sure if it's self-interest, because it's in the interest of everybody to get along,
Yeah. But there is an aspect. Yeah, you're right. There's an aspect of enlightened self-interest in it.
There is an aspect of it, but I would argue that it's much softer than, for example, a neutral behavior, because a neutral behavior has a ready expectation within it. You're not going to ask me more than I can give. I'm not going to ask you more than you're willing to give, and we're stopping there, But that attitude of, I'm going to give more than is expected, you cannot say that's selfish, I understand where it comes from, but it's not.
Thanks for talking me off the ledge of absolute definition. Yeah.
Yeah, because otherwise, every good deed is selfish.
Well, I think I think there is a selfish or an enlightened, the self-interest aspect to anything. But if I identify with you, then it becomes enlightened self-interest.
That's where I was gonna say, if it's selfish, it can only be selfish if you take yourself for the world.
That's right.
Which is a little bit selfish to take yourself for the world.
But that's the greatest hack, though. That's the greatest hack. That's what makes everything great, is to identify with my experience right now. Like, this is me.
But I don't think it's selfish, I think there ought to be another word for that.
Yeah. Really. Well, language, I love language, and it fails.
I think it's closer to a consensus, finding consensus, finding agreement where there is disorder, but consensus is not really that type of word, wouldn't be used to for that. But yeah, in any case, I do think that gratitude is complicated, because if I feel gratitude when I'm giving a gift, because it's true that, for example, the opportunity of helping somebody, I remember my mom, she used to tell me, you have to let people help you, you have to let people give you stuff, you have to let people do stuff for you, not because of the end game, not because of what they're gonna give you, but because you're letting them expressing, well, gratitude, I guess. I don't think she used that word, but you're letting them express, their love, their appreciation, their stuff. And it's true, like, it's not about what you receive, it's not the gift, it's the intention, it's everybody knows that in their heart.
The way you just said reminded me of Jordan. I think it's one of Jordan Peterson's rules of life, or one of them is like, do something, let somebody do something small for you so you can do something for them later.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that sometimes we have to let people in, and one of the way of letting people in is actually letting them help you. I guess it's a little bit of a hack also when we consider what we just said before. You let them help you, and then they feel attached to you.
Yeah, intention, like you said. Yeah,
there's another element that's interesting here, because I think it goes back to the like what Cordelh was saying about, like, the sense in which, if you're trying to give someone help, right, you can become more attached to that process than maybe the person who's receiving the help, right? Like the parent-child thing is a good example. But also, I think this happens like coaching, therapists, people who sponsor in addiction recovery programs. It's like, I think there's the same kind of thing there. But another thing, it's like, I think it's interesting, because I didn't think about this before this conversation, where it's like there's a mode in which, like, if you're the one who's giving the help in some capacity, that's actually an opportunity for you to be grateful for the capacity to be in that position. So I can probably rephrase it as like, so if I'm able to, like, let's say go buy a homeless person on the street like lunch, then that action itself of giving then allows me to be grateful for being in a position to be able to help that person, right? So then like by helping them, I can now be grateful for my position in the universe to, right, kind of do this thing. Whereas, like, before I did it, I can't be grateful for that because I literally just haven't done it yet. So I just think that's an interesting thing. I'm not sure how that
I
maps on
agree with
exactly.
you, and I feel like that is actually referenced in a lot of religious books. Actually, the fact of helping others, you will feel better about yourself, And actually, my grandmother used to tell me when I was very little, I was like 5, 7, whenever I would feel sad or mad or annoyed, or like little kids get, she would tell me, if you're feeling so sad, then go outside and help somebody, do something helpful. And it's true, you do something helpful, and you feel better because you did something good, and I think that links with what you said, to be thankful to be on that situation in which you can help. It does tap into that, I think. But I do also think that it's getting really close to theology, because it's a concept that is brought up a lot in religious books. Being thankful of being in a situation in which you can help others.
Andrew Huberman's podcast about gratitude has got some really good hacks.
One aspect of helping people that I learned the hard way is trying to help somebody who's not helping themselves much becomes destructive for both people. It's like, if they're not willing to help themselves, there's only so much help that they can receive and productively put into use. And again, the economist in me sits there and says, there are lots of people I can try to help out there. I like helping people, but I need to see some progress with them actually improving. And if they're not putting in the work themselves and not improving, then I need to help somebody who will improve. I'm going to tag out on that.
Well, I agree with you. There is definitely the factor that we were talking about, in the sense that when you help somebody, you have some expectations, you know. When somebody helps somebody, they have expectations, basically. And I would even argue it taps into the daddy issues, in which the dad has high expectation and then you break them all and he has no expectation at all after that. For example, you know. I mean, I have a dad who had very high expectations for me, and I didn't hold up on his expectation. I have my own expectations of myself, which means that it ended up into a clash.
The expectations, I mean, there's some, you know, I've heard it said that those are the things that's what needs to be killed. You know, that the expectation, the attachment to expectations for
killing
happiness.
the ego.
Who's that?
Killing the ego.
The ego?
Ego, yeah.
Mhm.
Killing the
Yeah.
ego. Don't go to war, kill your own ego. I've heard that. I can't remember who said that. Don't go to war, kill your own ego. It was,
That's
I think, a
good one.
German philosopher. I'm not sure, but I think.
I just wanted to express appreciation for Graham's Mendelbrit set. That's such a beautiful thing, and I'm like, oh, that's actually who I'm talking to. Is something like that. It behind all the faces, you know.
It's complicated, because I do believe that we start with expectation on every scale. You know, that we start life with expectations.
It's got to be constantly killed. Like there's an expectation maker that's necessary, but I also have to go. It reminds me of like the Jesus, you know, Jesus sacrificing himself on the cross. Like I have to have an ego, and I have to kill it.
Yeah, I agree.
But it's resurrected.
Yeah. With that situation, the way you put it, I do like it. But I have to say, it's such a strong statement. Killing the ego, I don't know.
It feels like a horrible idea every time I turn towards it. You know, like it feels scary. Like I'm gonna die, and then I'm like, I'm an illusion. Like the idea of me is a thing that happens in me that I can identify with. Or
there's another question, you know, that I do find interesting. In my life, there is often situation in which people bring up the fact that I should feel gratitude for life itself.
Well, it's just a choice. I mean, what's the other choice?
Yes, that's my point. That's my point. It's just a choice. You know, that is actually just my point, because I don't know, you know, like to me, that sort of statement enters into the concept of feeling gratitude for someone being. And I know it's about me and it's not about the others, but it still enters into that concept, you know. I personally, most of the time, feel like I have a goal, you know, like my goal is poetry and knowledge. And I want to read as much as I can, and I want to write as much poems as I can. And that's basically it. Well, it's not basically it, but you know, that's my objective. That's where I go. So when I hear about happiness, gratitude towards life, and all of those things, they really all seem more like distractions to me, you know, instead of going towards the main goal.
I mean, maybe appreciation. It seems like the person who, like, I've been socialized to think, and I fight against the socialization all the time, is I win when I get to say that person did something wrong, and I'm like, oh, I get points. I get victim points. I get judgment points, and then I got a whole bunch of these points, and I'm looking around for where do I turn these in for something that I can actually use. And like I'm trying to reframe it for myself into I get points when I find opportunity. I win when I find opportunity, and it bypasses my obsession with hierarchy, because then I'm like, oh, I won. I found the opportunity in this situation where somebody said something I didn't like to me. I win, you know, and finding, it seems like appreciation of the, you know, right-sized appreciation, not trying to go like, oh, I'm so happy that this is happening, but just saying, like accepting, like there's a saying in AA from the Big Book. It's acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. When I'm disturbed, it's because some person, place, thing, because I find some person, place, thing, or situation, some fact of my life unacceptable to me. And I can find no serenity until I accept that person, place, thing, or situation as being exactly the way it is supposed to be at this moment. Nothing, absolutely nothing happens in God's world by mistake. Until I could accept my ism, I could not stay sober. Unless I accept life completely on life's terms, I cannot be happy. It seems like it's synonymous to accept life completely on its terms. Before I do it, it seems like it's false. It's intellectual capitulation. But when I do it, when I experiment, take a first person science experiment and go like, okay, you know what? Thank you. I'm glad this happened. Like just say the words even without meaning them. My brain's like, my dumbass brain is like, thank you. There must be an opportunity around here. Why did I just say thank you? And it starts to look for opportunities. And I experience the entire situation in a different way.
Well, on a personal scale, I'm very strongly divided by two concepts. One is the acceptance, in which the most often I will find peace within. You know, if I'm in a situation that I hate and I cannot find a solution to, it's only when I accept it that I can sort of sleep it off or whatever. However, I keep thinking about that poem, Rage, you know, from Owen Wilson, I think, Rage Against the
Dying of the Light.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I have to say that when I do think about it, that concept of fighting what's wrong or what intellectually we find wrong, because that is not wrong. It's just that morally, intellectually, we find it like the opposite of life, basically. It does feel like raging sometimes is life, you know, like the fact of fighting to be alive is actually life. And that's the situation in which I find myself the most divided, you know, like, because at the same time, for example, okay, I'm gonna say a story a little bit gruesome and I'm gonna leave away the dark side of it. But for example, elephants, back in the days, to tame them, people used to basically do really horrible things to them while they were tied up until they would not react anymore to the very violent things they used to do to them. And once it wouldn't do anything more violent, because it was so uncomfortable what they did onto them, they knew that they could basically ride him or take him in the middle of crowded places and all that. So acceptance can be extremely violent sometimes, you know. I know that some other situation, it's like the perfect answer, that the acceptance of a situation can bring you peace. But in other situations, wow.
I think the way I want to push back, just, I mean, not against the meaning, but I just want to say, like, the way I mean it, and perhaps words can't convey it, is to just say, to accept me is to grasp the whole, to take in the whole, and to say to myself, these are the opportunities I have. All the opportunities I want is a much bigger set. And I accept that I want those opportunities and I do not have them. That's what acceptance means. Like there's something, seems like there's something evolutionary in me that says, that is like, it is its own reward to get in touch, to accept reality as I'm presenting it to you.
Then I think I want to connect your idea with my idea. Have you ever read Siddhartha? Yes. You see at one point in the book, Siddhartha goes from one extreme to the other, in which he lives from a life of wealth, luxury, and then decides to go live like the poorest of the poorest person. And it's only after those two experiences that he finds balance, in which he doesn't go to the extreme of being, you know, like too poor, or the extreme of being too luxurious. And I think that's what you mean by that ideal situation of acceptance. Because, and I think that's the issue. There is one word for the acceptance that's wrong and one word for the acceptance that's right, you know, and both of them are acceptance, but the truth is there is actually two forms of acceptance, you know.
Okay, what about for another word? This was defined for me by Goenka, the Vipassana guy, equanimity.
Yeah.
Like at the end of Siddhartha, he sits, he's the ferryman. He brings people across the river, and he just sits and he listens to at the babbling of the brook. And in it, he hears all the good things, all the bad things, all the compliments, all the insults, and all the in between. And he's like, that's the river. And that meta view is when I practice meditation, is perceiving my experience, the stream of the information carrying parts of my senses, as that's me. That's the embodied me, and I am this nothing sitting on the riverbank listening.
Perhaps it's only in that state that a person can feel gratitude towards the world. You know,
gratitude just for being, for observing. Yeah.
But I really think that it's a state of mind, you know, that person needs to reach that state of mind to actually be really capable of feeling gratitude towards just being, because being is, to me, it's not enough to be.
Well, when I'm grateful for it, then it is. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
but is this because there's a theme here that I don't know how to. I'll try to poke on it in some way. Like the idea that gratitude for life itself is just a choice seems kind of wrong to me, in the sense that, like, oh man, I don't know if this is gonna be a helpful direction, but like there's how do I say it? Like there's, so like take like major clinical depression, right? Where like someone is in a state of mind where like life is generally bad for them, or just like indifferent, right? Just like numb or negative, right? It's like, let's just say non-positive. It's like, I'm not sure it would make sense to say that, well, you know, they can just like, they just need to get in the state, because think about like the equanimity, I think Karl's calling, right? Kind of the state one can get glimpses into and periodically, touch base with, like kind of reconnect, I think is only possible if you have a practice, right, of meditation of some sort. And I want to also like bring in, like, because we're talking about like acceptance that can go well, which I think going well would be this kind of equanimity version. Maybe there's other versions, but going poorly, right, where it's like, oh, I just accept my life sucks, I'm not doing anything about it. Which I think there's a word for that called like learned helplessness, right? Where it's like, which I think is actually related to the thing that Cordelh brought up with elephant, where it's like, you know, you just keep shocking, right, the collar of the dog enough to where like they're like, well, I'm never going past that door because I get shocked every time, and you take it off, and so that it instills in them, they have accepted that this is like, right, the limits of what they can do. And actually, I bring up that because also it's tied to a use of an elephant where like they would, as you know, very small, I guess baby elephants, they would like tie the leg to a rope and put a stake in the ground, and it was because of their size, right? They couldn't actually pull it out. So then like they just got used to like, well, I can never pull on this. And eventually they get big enough to where like they can fucking do it, but like they just don't do it. And that's like, so that's, I think, an illustration of acceptance going down this kind of vicious path versus like the virtuous path. But so then I want to throw in a third thing, and I need y'all's help to kind of map this, or like what to do with this, or maybe it's just its own thing, where like there's like an acceptance of like one's capacity to grow and develop. So like, and this kind of, maybe this goes into this thing of like so like, let's say like you have like a friend or a family member or a romantic partner, where it's like you can accept them as they are, and that might mean two different things. Like if you think of them as let's say a noun, right, like a static kind of thing, then you're like, oh yeah, like I accept them, but they have all these bad habits and like, they're kind of like mean to people sometimes and they're irritable, blah, blah, right? But then if you switch thinking of the person from a noun into a verb as a process, then you say, I accept them. And by accepting them, I'm actually also accepting their capacity to develop and grow in this dynamic, right, kind of evolving way. So this kind of acceptance where like you're accepting the, the capacity for growth built into it as like a process. Like the person isn't a thing, it's a process. It's a thing to be engaged with, cultivated, and developed. I don't know where that fits, but it feels like this might be another version of like a virtuous acceptance. Say, how's that?
Accept somebody with a flaw. I like that. I like that because when I look at certain form of love I felt in my life, I can honestly admit that it wasn't just, pure adoration and whatever. It was actually acceptance of somebody with, all of their flaws, all of their qualities, knowing what I can ask them, knowing what I cannot ask of them, and stuff like that. And I have to admit, to me, that's true acceptance,
I agree,
I-
and I'm gonna have to bow out here, Kara. Thanks again. It was wonderful to go with Marshall, and I look forward to next time.
Thanks, Graham. Great having
Bye,
you.
Graham.
Thank you.
Appreciate being
Thank
here,
you
man.
so much. Yeah, I think I will close it for now, and you guys can stay in the after party. I want to say, this is what you did. You came in here today on the 13th of May to do the final chapter, the 13th chapter. This is what I feel. I feel so surprised. I never got a donation. Like actually, like this channel never got a donation. I mean, so thank you, Upcycle Club, so much. And you were the first one. So yeah. And yeah, shout out also to General Lobster Monkey. And this is the need of mine that was met. Well, there are so many needs of mine that were met. I just, it's just like I cannot even describe. I think I did have the need for a surprise. That's definitely, that one was met. Just like I'm surprised. Like that's like I did not know it will happen today. Like I was actually expecting more violent communication, as you always. And guys, all of you, what you did as well. You showed up and you helped. Thank you so much. I will provide the links below and to the YouTube channels, Cordelh's and Karl's and Graham's and Algernon's. Everybody, also guys, subscribe to Upcycle Club, although she does have, or he, I'm sorry, just like, I always thought it's a girl, like always hope. She does have a huge YouTube account with more than 70,000 subscribers. So it's like a very big YouTube channel. So I feel humbled as well, but like also very, very surprised. So thank you. And yeah, guys, I see you in the discussions of John Verweykianisms, where we talk human side of reciprocal narrowing. And like I do want to start with the Doma side, what it's like to lose a home, which will be an uplifting subject, of course.